of Charlotte City Council District 2, and I'm calling the Council Committee on Redistricting to order. In anticipation of receiving the 2020 U.S. Census data in September, the mayor established a council committee on redistricting. She named 4 members, council members Dimple as mayor, Ed Driggs, Greg Phipps, and wanted me to chair the committee, Malcolm Graham. Based on the input from the Citizens Advisory Committee on Governance and Phil Council's general consensus to the recommendations from the Budget and Effectiveness Council Committee presented at the 28th June business meeting, the committee's charge will be to develop redistricting recommendations guided by the following principles. Importance of the order is districts must have substantially equal population, 1 person, 1 vote rule. Districts should be reasonably compacted. District boundaries may follow neighborhood boundaries or the boundaries of areas containing residents sharing similar interests. District boundaries may be drawn to create, maintain representative balance between major political parties. District boundaries may follow precinct boundaries. District boundaries may be drawn considering the race of district residents as long as race is not the predominant motivating factor. In addition, districts likely to be impacted by future annexation or growth rates may be smaller to minimize impact on future annexations or future redistricting. District boundaries must be drawn to avoid contests between incumbents, and when possible, districts should have relatively even partisan balance. The committee will provide redistricting recommendations to the Phil Council to consider at the November 8th business meeting. The goal is to notify the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections of the new district by November 17th, 2021 deadline. So with that being said, I call the Redistricting Committee to order. I'd like to take the opportunity to have the committee members to introduce themselves. I'll start again. My name is Malcolm Graham, Chairman of the City of Charlotte Redistricting Committee representing District 2, and we'll kick it to those who are visiting with us virtually.
Good afternoon. I'm Dimple Ajmera, serving as an at-large council member and a committee member.
Ed Driggs, District 7, committee member.
Greg Phipps, at-large committee member.
Now I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome our mayor to our committee meeting. Mayor Lyles, would you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. By Lyles, Mayor, and I'll be listening today to the committee's deliberations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for your participation. A part of what we do and the importance of what we do is the guidance of our staff that will help us lead and guide us through this process. So at this time, could we have the staff team introduce themselves and the role that they'll be playing?
Thank you. I'm Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Lena James, Deputy City Attorney.
Tom Jones, City Attorney's Office.
Denata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Okay, so you have heard the charge that was given to the committee by the mayor. You have heard the criteria for which we will create districts. Now I will turn it over to the city attorney for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to start the process by actually skipping to Section 2 of the agenda, which is the update on the status of RFP evaluation for consultant. What we did in the last couple of weeks was that we put out an RFP to seek advice for consultants on the legal side and also well, for want of a better term, a demographer side to assist us in the process of redistricting. Ideally, you would have a lot of that knowledge on the staff already, but over the course of the last 10 years, most of that knowledge has lost, including myself. I'll be the first to acknowledge that I have not done a redistricting process here in Charlotte before, so this will be my first time doing one like this. So we did go out for an RFP. We had 4 very good, highly qualified groups that provided responses to our RFP, and we have chosen the group led by Parker Poe, a firm based in part here in Charlotte, and we have Mac McCarley, who's the former city attorney here in Charlotte, on the line. If I could turn it over to Mac to introduce himself and if he could tell us the team as well. if Mr. McCarley is on the line.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Parker Poe is honored to be working with the city on this project. The other person on the legal staff is Ladidra Matthews. She's helping me with research. And then to bulletproof it at the end and make sure that we've thought through all of the litigation potentials, our litigator on the team is Anthony Fox. As most of you know, both Anthony Fox and I used to work for the city at different times. Our planning staff is the firm of In Focus, and the lead person from In Focus will be Jonathan Wells. Jonathan also used to work for the city, and he and I together did about 6 of the post-annexation and 2 census redistrictings. So the experience that Mr. Baker was speaking of, Jonathan and I have a fair amount of that. So he and I will be leading the team, and we have other folks from InFocus to handle the GIS work and to assist the city with any public participation efforts that the city staff would like some assistance with. We are excited to be working with you and look forward to the project. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. McCauley, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the committee to welcome you to our redistricting process. We look forward to working with you and your team to accomplish the goals and objectives as outlined by the charge of the mayor. Obviously, we have a short period of time to do a lot of good work, 60, 70 days. So we look forward to engaging you and your team throughout this process. Is there any questions for Mr. McCauley from the members of the committee before we allow him to zoom out?
Oh,
Mr. Drace.
Hey, Mac, good to hear from you. You know the controversy that has surrounded redistricting, it seems in recent years especially. Are we going to be able to get this done locally without getting bogged down on packing and fracking and court challenges in your expectation?
Yes, sir. I believe we're going to be pretty close. I don't anticipate this being exceptionally difficult because we've not been able to do much annexation in the last 5, 6, 7 years since the legislative authority was restricted. I think the numbers are going to be relatively easy to work with.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Phillips, welcome.
Thank you. I just want to know, is this process that we're about to embark on, is it consistent with past efforts that we have done in redistricting?
From my perspective, Mr. Phipps, the answer is yes. The criteria that was laid out at the beginning of this meeting is the same exact criteria that's been used in Charlotte for, as far as I know, at least the last 20 to 25 years.
Okay. So, Mr. McCauley, we look forward to working with you over the next several weeks. There's hard work to do and heavy loads to lift. I'm certain that you and your team will be able to shoulder that responsibility with us, and so we look forward to working with you.
We too look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and we look forward to doing it very, very quickly.
Thank you, sir. One thing that I didn't mention.
May I be excused?
You are excused, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
One thing that I should have mentioned right up top, Mr. Attorney, was that there will definitely be a public process, right? So there will be public input, public hearings, and room for the public to engage the committee in terms of the work that we're doing. And so I should have mentioned that right from the very start. But that's a mistake of the mind, not the heart. So the public will be intimately involved in what we're doing. Secondly, Mr. Attorney, I talked to all the council members on the committee prior to this meeting about our responsibility, and it's a committee responsibility. We invite other council members to join us if they desire to do so. but we're going to try to limit the active participation to the members of the committee. And I think I've spoke with everyone in reference to that. I think there's consensus that based on the technicality of the work that we're doing, that would be probably in the best interest of everyone. I encourage all council members who have an interest in our work to keep a parking lot list of questions, put those questions in writing to us so that we can respond to them accordingly and keep the record. So again, I just said for our colleagues, certainly they are welcome to attend, but please know that we're going to limit the active participation, active discussion to the members appointed by the mayor. I turn it back over to you, Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Chairman Graham. I'd like to pull up the PowerPoint if we could and just go straight to slide number 5. We can talk about the proposed timeline process so you see the timeline in front of you and the basis for why we're moving fairly quickly. So what you have in front of you is based on the legislation coming out of Raleigh, SB 722. And based on that, we're anticipating getting the block-by-block census data sometime in September. And I'll have a slide that gives the district breakdown in terms of the information that we have right now. But we're expecting the block-by-block data, and that's really the data that we need to do the heavy-duty lifting on the redistricting process. On October the 11th, and that's a proposed date, would be our public hearing on proposed revised districts. We've chosen that date, again, to give us as much time as possible, not only to hear from the public, but also to make any changes or adjustments that we need to make going forward, because you'll see that the next meeting after the October 11th would be your land use meeting, and then we have the October 25th meeting as well as a potential backup date. But we're shooting for October the 11th because if we go to October the 25th, we'll have a very short timeline to take the public comments and do much with them. And that's why we've chosen October the 11th to get moving. Assuming that we get that block-by-block census data, let's say by the end of September, then you see that we have a very short amount of time to really dig into the district information to be in a position to potentially have something to hear from the public on October 11th. I don't expect to have a complete map by that time, but we can at least hear and get moving with that information. Assuming we keep that timeline, November 8th would be the time that we would present to council for adoption of the revised district maps based on the census data. We're trying to stick into that early November period because if we miss that deadline, now you're looking at a December period. It just backdates everything, and I haven't even really put that, well, we did put up that option potentially as we go forward. But we're really shooting for that November 8th, which would keep us online to have that passed on that date, provide the information to the local board of elections here in Mecklenburg County on November the 12th, so that they have the time to go ahead and implement the revised electoral districts by November 17th, which is the first deadline put forth in the legislation to move forward. Assuming we meet that deadline, then December 6th through the 17th would be the filing period for the municipal elections. That's district, at-large, and mayor. The filing period would be December 6th through the 17th of this year. If for some reason we miss that November 17 deadline, there is a second deadline that I think goes to December 16th? 17th was the second deadline. And if we end up having to use the December deadline, then the second filing period would be January 3rd through the 7th. That's only if we miss that November 17 deadline and have to use the December 17 deadline going forward. Hope we don't have to worry about that date at all. In any event, your municipal primary will be on March the 8th, 2022. and your general election would be on April 26, 2022. It's my understanding, based on the law, that as soon as the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections can certify the results, that's when you can swear in the winners of the general election to move forward. So I'll take any questions on that timeline if need be.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Again, I just want to highlight the November 8th council adoption of the revised district maps based on our census data. The mayor charged us to bring back a report to the committee that they can vote on that date, and it's my intention, members of the committee, to meet that obligation that she set out. So that's the date that we're shooting for. As I said earlier, there will be public input, public hearings on the proposed revised districts as well. And so, again, that's the target date for both of those that I wish that everyone would highlight and kind of bring to memory, because those are the critical drop-dead dates from my perspective for the committee. Councilmember Driggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we planning to have another meeting of this group to consider the recommendations of the demographer in time for us to, talk about what is being offered before this October date?
Yes, we will. In fact, I anticipate there'll be some discussion about the next meeting dates. I don't know if those have been posted yet or not, but there will be multiple meetings of this group. Those meetings are not included in this timeline.
Okay, I'll just note that when the county did its redistricting back in 2012, I think it was, several maps were offered. And they all had names like Cowboy this and such that, and public input was solicited on what people thought about those options. So in this case, are we expecting to get a unique recommendation from the demographer and then just proceed on a yes or no basis with that? Or how do we think it's going to work?
We'll have more information for you as we go. I do anticipate that once we have that block by block data, that we will produce a map for the committee to consider and to start working on in advance of the October 11 public hearing. But I wouldn't expect that you would have a completely finished draft at that time, but you'll at least have some talking points to go forward in advance of that hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Phipps?
Yeah, with respect to the ETJ areas that want to voluntarily annex into the city, do they have like a date certain that, are those considerations out the window as of now? Or what do we do with those ETJ areas that come in within this intervening period?
That's a very good question, Mr. Phipps. I would assume that if there are any voluntary annexations that occur between now and then, that those would be considered going forward. I've not asked that question, but I'll have a better answer for you at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so you see the calendar and the key dates that are in front of you. So these are our benchmarks along the way, particularly, again, October 11th and November 8th, and by November 12th to get the information that's adopted by the council to the Board of Elections. So, Mr. Baker, continue.
Thank you. The second bullet there is the consideration of the public input process. We'll be having conversations, and again, we've just brought on the Parker Poe group on today, as a matter of fact, is when we put out that notice to them. We will have some discussions about the public input process and have that information for you by the time of your next meeting in terms of what our recommendation would be. Obviously, all of your meetings of this subcommittee will be held publicly, and there will be a legislatively required public hearing that, again, we proposed on October the 11th. But we will have we just haven't had the time to speak with them in terms of how in the past, in particular, public input has been received outside of the scheduled meetings. But at your next meeting, we will have that information in terms of a proposal for how to go forward with public input. And I'll stop there. If folks have questions or recommendations in that regard, I'm happy to take those at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. And again, as I said earlier, public participation and input is really going to be critically important to us. One of my goals as the committee chair is to be as transparent as possible in terms of what we do, when we do it, and why we're doing it. And so not only transparent to the public, but also to keep our council colleagues updated each and every step of the way. So there won't be any confusion when we land this plane in early November. And so I'll entertain any questions and or any comments that the committee members may have in reference to how to generate interest from the public in our public process, knowing that this is our first initial kind of orientation meeting.
Mr. Chair, it's Driggs.
Yes, Mr. Drakes.
So we're going to have the hearing on the maps. It didn't show on the timeline when the map would be posted or made available for the public to think about leading up to the hearing. Do we know what that date is?
We don't have that information right now, but I do anticipate that we will have something certainly before the 11th where we can make that information available. We don't have it precisely right now.
Good. And I agree with you, Mr. Chair. Transparency is key for us, so we need to have a good process for capturing all the input we get from people at the hearing and preferably online as well, so that the committee can think about how it might impact the final map.
I agree with you, Mr. Drakes, and that's why I'm asking everyone who has any type of input to this process to put it in writing so we can track it, as well as make sure that we respond to it appropriately.
Thank you.
Any additional questions in reference to, and again, this is something that the members can think about in terms of how we should engage the public. Obviously, we've received letters already concerning public input, and at some point, as Mr. Baker said, we will respond to that in a more comprehensive type of way so the public can know when and where and how they can engage the process. Okay? Mr. Baker, continue.
All right. If we could if we could move to slide 6 on the PowerPoint, the next slide. So this is some census information that we have received. This is not the critical block-by-block census data, but it does give you a sense as to what the population of the districts are. And these are going to be the numbers that we're generally working off of. Again, it's the block-by-block data that will allow us to actually balance these numbers. And I'm going to ask Ms. James if she can help me with this as we go forward, because there are a couple of numbers that I know I'm not going to give you the right basis for. So what you see there are the districts 1 through 7 and the current total population. This is from the census. We're using 125,598, and that's essentially the grand total divided by 7, hopefully. That's the target number for each district. And obviously, we're not going to have all 7 districts be at that exact number. And I'm sorry that there's a 10% rule in there. In North Carolina, there's a 5% rule, and that's done judicially. It's not done by statute, that the districts need to be plus or minus 5% of that 125,598 number. That's the target that we're shooting for. So you see the populations in districts 1 through 7 and the variance off of that that target 125,598 number and the percentage that you see there as well. And you'll see that based on what I'm seeing, Mr. Driggs' district is the only district that is currently in that plus or minus 5% area. The other 6 districts are out of balance. If you can understand what I mean by that term and would need to be brought into balance. Obviously, you're bringing all 7 into balance, so it's not to say that there wouldn't be any changes in District 7. It's just to achieve that balance. You see that 6 of the 7 districts right now are currently out of balance, and as we get that block by block data, we'll be moving those numbers to get that balance to preferably within that judicially accepted standard of plus or minus 5% of the overall balance of the organization. Ms. James, could you tell them about that 28,499 number at the bottom?
Sure, and I just wanted to clarify, we also do have our data analytics folks on the call so they can speak more specifically. They did pull this information and this data from the census file that the Census Bureau released last week. I think many of you were aware that there was a release and a press announcement from the Census Bureau. So this number is based on that. I think we believe from our data folks that it is likely reliable, probably not subject to change a whole lot before the end of September. But that 28,499 number that's at the very bottom of the total column is essentially the difference between the smallest district, which I believe by population appears to be District 6, and the largest, which I believe is District number 3. So that number simply reflects the difference between the smallest and the largest, and then the equal size in the row right above that is essentially showing you what should be the ideal population size based on the total population for the city of Charlotte from that data.
And again, this is the big picture data. When we have the block by block information, that is the information that we're waiting for that would allow us to do the heavy lifting that we'll be doing over the course of the next couple of months. And I don't know if there's anyone on the staff that can speak to the numbers that wants to chime in at this time.
Anyone from planning, I would imagine,
I think so.
on the call that would like to introduce themselves?
Well, Ms. Hefner may be on. She can probably clarify the numbers.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rebecca Hefner with Innovation and Technology. These are, Lena and Patrick did a great job explaining the numbers. These are some close estimates of the district population based on the 2020 census redistricting file that again was released 2 weeks ago now, I think, that has all of the data from required for redistricting, the population counts at the block level. You can see on the map that this is still a little rough in terms of some of the areas going outside the council district boundaries. So there's some refinement that the consultants will do, Barker Toe and InFocus, as they get started on this work. But these numbers are pretty close to the totals that we'll see in that census file. I'm happy to answer any questions about the data as needed.
Okay, thank you. Again, before I turn it over to the council members for questions, I'll ask the first one. So this is big picture data, right? You don't expect too much variance on these numbers. They're kind of within the zip code of where we are, right? And then the more granular data we're expecting late September, possibly mid-September. Can we talk about the timeline for getting that in?
And if I could bounce it back to Ms. Hefner on that piece, because I've heard different things about how the data comes in and whether or not you've got the equipment to potentially start looking at that block by block data a little sooner. This is way beyond. Once we get into those numbers, I have to turn it over to a numbers person. I'm a word person. But Ms. Hefner, could you chime in a little bit more about that block by block information and when we can start using it?
Certainly. The data are already available. They have the block by block level data that's required to do the redistricting has been released by the Census Bureau. It hasn't been released in the nice pretty version of their website. So, it's just been released in the raw data files. But certainly, we were able to pull those files and summarize and visualize based on those data. Our consultants can do the same thing, so they will be able to get started with looking at the block by block analysis right away.
Okay. And that's good news because it allows us more runway to meet our November 8th deadline. I think originally we were expecting not to get that data until the end of September. And so what I'm hearing today is that data is available. It's not formatted the way that you would want, but you can dig and get it. Am I hearing that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, and so I think that's good news. It may be more work for you, right, in terms of kind of getting it out, but at least the committee knows now that the data's here. It's cumbersome to get to, so we can get it, but the more refined version will probably be available in a nice, neat format, probably mid-September, at the earliest, late September at the latest. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that's correct. And we're also able to put the data file out in a more accessible format if needed in the interim. It's just the Census Bureau won't be publishing it on their website in an easy to manipulate format until the end of September.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think that's good news for us, and it allows us to move forward. One last question. Again, I'm asking questions that I know the answer to already, but I just want to make sure that we educate the public as we go along. We're looking ideally for 125,000 residents per district. That's plus or minus. That's the goal, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And one of the things that we said is that I would like to do, because this is so, the council members that represent districts really know their districts. They know the boundaries. They know the unique characteristics. They have a pretty good understanding of the demographics. What I would like to do is meet with every district representative one-on-one as a part of this process, away from the committee meeting, just to make sure that there's some engagement with those members as well, so we can get their comments, their feedback, their suggestions, so we can incorporate them in any document that we produce. And that type of scheduling will come out later from myself as well as Mr. Baker as we move forward. So I'll open the floor up for questions from the committee members. Ms. Ashmera, welcome. Ms. Ashmera, you're up.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I had my question about 10% rule. I think that was addressed where the 28,499 total comes from. But I guess I'm trying to understand what is this 10% rule? I know that we are So I guess this 10% rule sort of confuses people because that's not the rule we are using. It's really the plus or minus 5%.
Ms. Majera, I think Patrick noted earlier, if you could just disregard where it says the 10% rule, disregard those words. But that number, 28,499, is the difference between the smallest district, which District 6, which has the 113,719, and then if you take the difference from that to the largest district that has the 142, that's what that number is, the 28. So it might actually be more than 10% in this particular case. The national rule of thumb from case law is that you don't want to have a deviation of more than 10%. And in North Carolina, as Patrick noted, the case law has suggested that what you don't want is a deviation of more than 5% from the ideal size. And the ideal size is the 125,000.
Yeah, so I understood where 28,499 came from. So I guess instead of 10% rule, it would be 5% plus or minus to balance, and then to ensure. I'm just clarifying this from the transparency perspective, as Mr. Chairman had alluded to earlier, specifically stated that transparency is key throughout this process. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct, under North Carolina law, yes.
Councilmember Drakes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 28,000, or more importantly, the 22% is just one way of illustrating the issue that we have to resolve. That is too big a gap, and our goal is to get that gap within the bounds of North Carolina law. I think that's the best way to look at that. I wanted to say, Rebecca, I did the same thing as this, using numbers that we got from staff estimates in 2018. And I went one step further, and I estimated that each precinct has an average of about 5,000 to 6,000 people, and therefore it appeared to me that the biggest change in the number of precincts in any district would not be greater than 3. Does that sound right to you, or have you looked at that at all?
I haven't looked at the precinct level data yet, Mr. Driggs. What I would say, though, is if you used an analysis based on 2018 or 2019, those estimates might have been a little low in terms of how many precincts might move, because the farther away you get from the decennial census, the less reliable the estimates become. So when we looked at the 2019 estimates, for example, the variance was not quite as large as what it is now that we can see the full data from the 2020 census. So I haven't looked at the precinct level yet, but I would estimate that number may grow just a little based on the fact that the variance in 2020 is bigger than what it looked like from the 2019 estimates.
I get that. I was also looking at these numbers that you just provided and applying the same thought process at 5,000 to 6,000 average per precinct. It's just a back of the envelope suggestion that the magnitude of the changes that might be necessary in order to achieve this balance is probably not greater than 3 precincts. The precincts themselves won't change, right? All we're doing is we're going to move precincts among the districts in such a way as to achieve the desired result, right? Patrick?
So if that's part of the...
That's correct.
Go ahead.
That's correct. You're just, it's where the precincts are going to be as it relates to the district that they're going to be in, correct?
Okay, so the precincts are the same. Last comment I'll make is, if we look at this, we can see that there's been higher growth in some areas than others. Does it make sense in our districting process to target a lower number in the higher growth districts so that over time, given that we probably won't do this again for 10 years, we sort of grow into rather than depart from equality in the districts?
Typically, you would take into account trends that you can tell at the time of redistricting. Those should be taken into account so that, again, as you said, over the course of time, the districts are going to become out of balance. But if we know that a lot of the growth is in a particular area, we can take the opportunity now to account for that going forward. And that's part of what we'll be doing between the staff and the demographer about where the growth has been in Charlotte, in what areas, and we'll take that into account as we go forward, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Phipps.
Yeah, those blue areas adjacent to the existing district lines, do they represent the ETJ areas? I mean, is this whole picture illustration we have here, is that supposed to be the Charlotte city limits or?
Yes, that's correct. What's in 1 through 7, those boundary areas would be the Charlotte city limits. The blue areas, I would imagine some of that's going to be ETJ, and then some of that's just going to be county as you get further away from the district lines, is how that would normally work, but we don't have the ETJs set out specifically. There are also towns, the other towns in Mecklenburg County that are included in that blue as well. We just
okay.
haven't spelled those out.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Baker?
All right, so we've given you the gist of where we are right now. As I mentioned, we've just brought on our consultants, and we'll start working with the consultants. The staff, both on the administration side and the attorney side, will start to engage the consultants now. As you heard from Ms. Hefner, we do have the ability to start the heavy lifting process, the block by block process sooner rather than later. We don't have to wait until the census puts it in the most usable form. We can actually start that work a little sooner, which is a good thing for the district, for the committee, and I believe a good thing for the public as well, that we can have a little longer public conversation as we're considering the redistricting. So we will be having those conversations, I would expect very soon, starting this week, in preparation for your next meeting. And I don't know that those have been put on the calendar yet, but I do anticipate getting those out to the group fairly soon. Once the staff has had the opportunity to consult, have a couple of meetings with the consultants, I would expect to have a recommendation in terms of going forward with the meetings to keep everybody on track in this process.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baker. As you can tell, we have a lot of work to do in a short period of time. The good news is that, as Mr. Baker indicated, that the block-by-block data is available, cumbersome at best, but we have access to it, which will allow us to begin our work a lot sooner than expected. So the next will be probably a memo coming from Mr. Baker and myself in terms of how we move forward with the next committee meetings, the public process, getting Parker Poll engaged in terms of what we're doing, and having staff have those internal meetings to get prepared for our next meeting. So again, today's meeting was just kind of level setting, orientation, kind of getting everything kicked off. I think we're at a good spot. As always, if there's anything that comes across my desk from Mr. Baker and his staff that's of interest to the committee, I will shoot them out to the committee members for sure, and in some cases to the entire council, so that we can make sure that everyone is abreast of what we're doing, what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, and trying to, again, make sure that when we land this plane in late October, early November, that everyone is on board as much as possible. That's the goal. So if there's not any final questions from the committee members or the mayor, we will officially close out the meeting if there's no other questions or concerns.
And Mr. Chair, did we say when the next meeting was going to be?
No, we said we will send a memo out.
Okay.
It will definitely be on a Monday. I think by consensus, we all agree that we will meet on Mondays, and based on the new information in reference to the block-by-block data, we're going to take that into consideration so that when we do meet again, that we have a pretty full agenda that we can really dive into what we're going to do. Okay, so staff probably needs a couple of days, Rebecca, to kind of dig into the data and get us the information, and then we have to orientate in getting Parker Poll engaged, as well as Rebecca and her teammates, to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're kind of swimming upstream together. That's the goal. Okay? Thank you, everyone. I guess I'll see you guys tonight. Meeting adjourned.